Welcome back to the deep dive. We're diving into project management today, stakeholder management specifically. You gave us this chapter from the PMBOK guide, and whether you've been doing project management forever or you're just starting out, I think there's something in here for everyone
Yeah.
about how to really make sure that your stakeholders are in track.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the PMBOK is such a good resource for this.
It is. So, stakeholder management, what is that?
Well, the PMBOK defines it as the process of, well, first identifying everybody that can impact or be impacted by your project. But then it goes beyond that. It's about understanding their needs and expectations, how much influence they have, and then developing those strategies to keep them informed and involved.
Right, so it's almost like you're not just building an internal team, you're building this team of everyone who's got a stake in this project.
It is. It's a great analogy. And just like with any team, communication is key. But one thing that the PMBOK highlights is that this isn't just a one-time thing. It's not like you just identify everybody and then you're good. It's an ongoing process that you have to revisit pretty regularly. So think of it as like a continuous conversation, not just a one-way announcement.
Right, so it's a dynamic process, it's not static. And speaking of processes, the PMBOK, they outline 4 processes for project stakeholder management. So let's take a look at those. The first one is identify stakeholders. Sounds kind of straightforward, but I'm sure there's some things to unpack there.
Yeah, you'd think it'd be pretty simple. But even those of us who've been doing this a long time, sometimes we miss key stakeholders. And that can really cause some roadblocks as you move forward in a project. One of the most common pitfalls is just assuming that you already know who all the stakeholders are without really doing a thorough analysis. And so the PMBOK really emphasizes using some tools and techniques to uncover those hidden stakeholders, like brainstorming, interviews, analyzing project documents.
Don't assume.
Exactly. Assume makes an ass out of you and me.
That's right.
And once you've identified them, it's really important to document all that information in one central location, like a stakeholder register.
Okay, so what kind of information are we talking about here? Is it just their contact info?
Oh, it's much more than that. Think of it like a stakeholder profile. So you're going to want to include, of course, their name, their role, contact information, but then also their level of interest in this project, their influence. What are their expectations? Any potential impacts they could have on the project? Are they positive? Are they negative? And then also, you want to note their current engagement level. Are they unaware of the project? Are they resistant, neutral, supportive? Or are they leading the charge?
So you're trying to figure out where they stand,
Mhm.
what their motivations are. All of that feeds into how you engage with them, which leads us to the next step,
Yeah.
which is plan stakeholder engagement.
Yes. And this is where you take all of that information that you gathered and you turn it into a strategic plan, like a playbook for how you'll engage with each person. It outlines things like your communication approach, the frequency of your interactions with them, and even the types of information that you'll be sharing.
So it's really a personalized communication plan for each stakeholder.
It is, yeah. You're taking into consideration their unique needs and expectations. And just like with any good plan, you need to be flexible. The PMBOK points out that these engagement levels can shift throughout a project. So, someone who's supportive at the beginning might become resistant if their needs aren't met, or someone who is completely unaware of it might become like a champion for the project once they understand its value.
So you're always monitoring, you're always adjusting,
Right. It's not static, it's dynamic.
and it's a conversation that evolves as the project goes on.
Exactly. And that leads right into the next process, which is manage stakeholder engagement.
Which is what we'll dive into next time. On the deep dive, we'll look at how to effectively manage that engagement and make sure everybody's informed and on board as we go through the entire project. Lifecycle. Welcome back to the deep dive. We're still in the PMBOK talking about project stakeholder management. And we've made it to the manage stakeholder engagement phase. I feel like this is where the rubber hits the road.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It really is all about executing that stakeholder engagement plan. But as we've already said, it's not just about setting it and forgetting it. You're constantly engaging, communicating, and adapting based on the feedback you get.
And the PMBOK really stresses communication here.
Oh, absolutely. It says clear, consistent communication. That is the bedrock of effective stakeholder management. And it goes on to say, it's not just sending regular updates or like status reports. You have to foster that open dialogue, really listen to their concerns, and be responsive to their feedback. It's a two-way street.
So how do you make sure the communication really is two-way? It's so easy to just broadcast information without having a conversation.
It is, yeah. That's a challenge a lot of people face. But the PMBOK gives us some really good advice. It talks about using a variety of methods. It's not always about email or formal presentations, sometimes a quick phone call, or even just grabbing coffee with someone can be so much more effective for really building that rapport and understanding their perspective.
So it's about matching the communication channel to the person and the situation.
Exactly. And you have to be proactive in getting feedback, you know? Don't wait for them to come to you with problems or concerns. You need to regularly be asking for their input, whether it's through surveys or meetings or just informal check-ins. That shows them that you really value what they have to say and that you're committed to keeping them in the loop.
It sounds like listening is just as important as talking here.
Oh, it is, yeah. Active listening is absolutely crucial for building trust. And understanding their needs and their concerns, it means really hearing what they're saying, not just waiting for your turn to talk. It also means acknowledging their feedback, even if you don't necessarily agree with it, and then explaining how you're going to address their concerns.
So it's all about partnership and collaboration, making sure everyone feels heard and respected. Which brings us to that final process. In the PMBO's framework, monitor stakeholder engagement. Why is monitoring so important?
Well, it helps you see how effective you actually are. And then you can make adjustments if you need to. It's about answering the question, is this plan actually working?
You're taking the temperature of the relationship, seeing where things are going well, and where there might be some issues.
Exactly. The PMBOK says there are a bunch of different tools you can use for this, like stakeholder surveys, having regular meetings, even just informal observations. You can track their satisfaction, how involved they are, and just their overall sentiment about the project.
Are there any tools that they specifically call out?
Yeah, one of them is the Stakeholder Engagement Assessment Matrix. It's a way to visualize where each stakeholder is in terms of how engaged they are, compared to where you want them to be. So it helps you see if you need to adjust your strategy.
So you're basically seeing if your efforts are working.
Exactly. And the nice thing is that it's an iterative process. You're always monitoring, analyzing, and adjusting. This makes sure that you're responding to the changing needs of the project and of the stakeholders.
So the big takeaway here is, stakeholder management isn't a one-time thing. It's this ongoing conversation. You need to be paying attention to it constantly, be ready to adapt, and really commit to building these relationships.
Yes, that's a perfect way to put it. Now, why don't we move on to some of the trends that the PMBOK highlights? There's some really interesting stuff about how stakeholder management is evolving.
Okay, so we're back, still talking about the PMBOK, and I know they mentioned some trends in stakeholder management. Anything jump out at you?
Yeah, there are a couple of things that I thought were really interesting. One is just how the definition of a stakeholder is getting broader. You know, you used to be just those directly involved in the project, but now it's like, whoa, regulatory bodies, community groups, even the media.
So you're thinking about how the project impacts all these different groups.
Exactly. It's like a ripple effect.
Yeah.
And that kind of ties into another trend they talked about, co-creation. So instead of just telling stakeholders about decisions you already made, you're actually involving them in the process from the beginning.
So how does someone listening, how do they use this co-creation thing without it getting out of control?
Yeah, it's a good question. It takes a different way of thinking. You have to be willing to share control and really collaborate. But when you do that, you can get some amazing results. You're tapping into all this knowledge and experience. You might come up with solutions you never would have thought of on your own.
Yeah, you're bringing all those different perspectives together. And that can only make the project better. Now, the PMBOK also says that there's no one right way to manage stakeholders. You have to adjust based on the project.
Right. They call them tailoring considerations, and they're really important. One big one is stakeholder diversity. If you're working with people from different cultures, different backgrounds, different levels of authority, you have to adjust your communication style.
Like a chameleon.
Exactly. And another thing to think about is communication technology. We have so many options now, but you have to choose the right tool for the job. Email's great for updates, but if you need to build trust with someone, sometimes you need to meet face-to-face.
So you have to be strategic. Okay, now, what about Agile environments? Those are a little different.
Yeah, the PMBOK says that in Agile. You have to be even more proactive and transparent. Things move so fast, you can't leave your stakeholders in the dark. So regular communication, direct feedback, aggressive transparency, all of that is really important.
Aggressive transparency. I like that. So basically, you're always being open about how the project's going.
Exactly, and that's how you build trust. They feel like they're part of the team, even when things are changing quickly.
Well, this has been a fantastic deep dive. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
Now, for everyone listening, think about your own projects. What's one thing you can do today to improve your stakeholder engagement? Maybe schedule a check-in with someone, or look at your information in mind.
Yeah, even small changes can make a big difference. Better communication, stronger relationships, and ultimately more successful projects.
That's great advice. And one last thing to think about. How do all these global projects, different cultures, different time zones, how does that change how you manage stakeholders?
That's a great question. It's something we all have to think about.
It is. All right, well, that's it for our deep dive into project stakeholder management. Thanks for joining us. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep those stakeholders engaged.